In this n8n Masterclass, you're going to learn how to build AI agents and automated workflows. So what is n8n? It's a low-code automation tool. I'm sure that you've heard about no-code tools or low-code tools that it allows you to build AI agents and automated workflows, that you could stick into your business, or just workflows that's going to perform automated tasks. But the benefit of it is that you don't need any sort of coding background to learn how to build on n8n. It's super easy to get started, and I actually don't have a coding background. I just did maybe a couple courses when I studied back in university, but I do not know how to code full stack, back end, front end. So using no code tools is like really an advantage for me because I have the idea of what I want to build. And as long as you have the idea of the problem you're trying to solve, you can find an automation or learn how to build the AI agent for it. And n8n is just a cool tool to use. There are others out there like make.com or using Zapier, but I feel like it's a bit limited compared to n8n. I just feel like you can do a lot more with this platform, and we're going to get into all of that. So the benefits of actually using a tool like n8n increase efficiency and productivity within your business. So it's going to allow you to do things quicker, faster, and I just feel like we're going to be super productive human beings with all the tools that's available at our disposal. Of course, with increased efficiency comes you're going to be spending less time on things, and of course inevitably it leads to less cost that you're going to be spending on perhaps more resources, or time is money. So that's another benefit. And then of course scalability. It's going to allow you to build systems that will allow you to scale. Being a service-based business or a product-based business, we know that it's dependent on perhaps in the past man-hour and manpower, whereas now you can build these automated systems that's going to take care of so many manual processes and tasks that you can just perhaps automate. So why learn n8n? Apart from those benefits, you as an employee or young working professional or an entrepreneur, I feel like this is going to really set us apart when we implement this on the back end in our business, whether it across marketing, sales, operations. It's going to be so beneficial to perhaps getting ahead of competition and just allowing you to focus on the thing that really matters, and you can spend more creative time on pushing the needle and really implementing things that is going to move you forward, and not having to worry about kind of the back end and how the system's going to work. By implementing like these no-code tools, it's going to allow you to solve all those inefficiencies in your business, all those bottlenecks, and just allow you to scale. Another advantage is there's so many integrations. So if your company uses, for example, Google Workspace, n8n integrates with Google Workspace, with and all the applications under Google Workspace like Google Sheets, Google Docs. It's super easy to get started, and of course integrate, and the apps can essentially talk to each other. And I'm going to walk you through how to set up all these integrations. But whatever tools that you're currently working with, it's there's more than 300 apps that n8n works with. And then of course, it's if n8n doesn't have a built-in integration with an app, we can use an API to actually call the app and talk to the app. So there's many advantages of using this, and it's really important in my opinion to learn how to build on this type of software. And another advantage is the cost. So now there's so many tools out there, AI tools, and if you implement one in marketing, one in sales, one in ops, the costs add up. And if you're a small business, or an entrepreneur or an employee who perhaps doesn't have the budget to pay for all these different types of softwares, like you can literally build those softwares and replicate it with no-code tools, and not just perhaps using n8n on the back end, but using a tool, using a webhook and connecting it to a Replit or a Lovable on the front end. Now you have your own full stack app that you're running that's going to cost you a fraction of what you would pay on these other platforms. So how to set this up? So if we go to n8n, so basically this is the platform and what it looks like. This is my n8n. This is all my workflows that I've built. And on the left here is a navigation panel. And then here is where we'd actually be creating our workflows. So just quickly, what does the workflow look like? If I go to create workflow, what we would do is, if you want to add a node, which essentially would give a task in the workflow, we'd go either to add step and then this window pops up, or we could just click on here and then this window pops up. And of course, it's also important to always save your automations. And if you'd like to import an automation, perhaps, it's a template that you found online or a template that, you found in my school community, all you go is these 3 dots here and then go to import from file, and then it's going to bring up the entire workflow. Something else to mention is the amount of templates that's available from n8n themselves. So if you go to templates, you'll see that there's almost 3,000 templates that you can already start working from. And if you look at Derek, let's see what Derek built. So Derek built an AI assistant using Telegram, which is pretty awesome. It's basically an AI agent, as you can see. So you can say click to explore, and you can actually zoom in, and I see that he also made a video on how to use this. And if you want to actually use this template, all you do is use for free, and you say import to cloud workspace, and then you'd have to set up all of these call it integrations, but I'll skip that for now. And as you can see, the workflow is now fully loaded into my workspace. One more thing to mention here, n8n has quite a comprehensive document resource library. So if you go to help, you'll see documentation, and it's very extensive. It really helped me to get started, just a quick read of how integrations work, how hosting works, coding, APIs, it gives you further information. I'm just, touching the surface. This here actually goes deep. So self-hosting versus cloud hosting, which should you do? I think that, in my opinion, there's kind of advantages and disadvantages for both. So I'll quickly run through the advantages and disadvantages of both. So if you actually look at self-hosting versus cloud hosting, self-hosting, I'd recommend using self-hosting if you want to have full control over your infrastructure. And then, of course, also if you currently have, if you're self-hosting other apps in your business, and then you want to fully integrate, n8n with that, I think on your perhaps servers or local servers, I recommend self-hosting. And then, of course, it's a bit more technical in terms of maintenance and setting up things. And, if you are comfortable handling server management, I highly recommend self-hosting. On the cloud side, I think this is majority of us, and I recommend this as a beginner, it's quite simple to get started, because literally n8n is taking care of all the maintenance and it's hosted on their platforms. It's quick to set up, and of course it's quite reliable in terms of it's cloud hosting, so it's quite reliable. The only thing here is we'd have to pay for a subscription every month, but I'll run through the cost just now. And of course, your data is going to be handled by n8n or third party. So there's also something else that you can do is self-host through Hostinger. So that's what I do, and you can see how cheap it becomes. $5 a month, and of course you can get a discount if you're taking a longer package. But I think that, for 12 months, it's working out at, $5 a month, that's $60 for the year, which is not bad at all. And of course, if you don't want to use this option, you can just get the program from n8n themselves. And I think it's a bit more expensive through n8n. I think it works out to about 24 euros a month. Hence why Hostinger for me would be a suitable cloud option if you're looking to use cloud hosting. So let's talk about the n8n interface. So really there's kind of 3 components that we need to be focusing on. And the first is workflow. So think about workflow. If I have to use a restaurant example, because I heard someone else explain this way better than I did, but they basically said that, the workflow is kind of like the recipe of of what you are trying to build. A node is basically the ingredients. So if you think of workflow as, the entire recipe, a node is each individual ingredient that is required for this dish, and then the execution of it is essentially getting a new order and getting more of this and replicating this process. So that's kind of terminology that we need to just keep in mind, and I'll walk through each of these right now. So in terms of support, as mentioned in the previous section, there's a bunch of templates and a community. So if you go to n8n if you go to templates, you'll see, of course, there's all these templates here, but also access to a community, which is pretty cool. If you look at all these individuals that are kind of participating here, all you have to do is just sign up, and then you can join this community where you can, of course, like get extra support, or of course you can, if you're not watching this in school, in my community right now, you can join my community. Basically, you'll find all my templates to my YouTube videos. You can easily download it, and of course you'll also find other like-minded people in here. It's just a new community, hence it's still growing. $9 a month, and of course it's increasing to $49 of the first 50 members. So of course here I'm going to be just sharing all my builds, all my automations, support, access to Q&As. So if you struggle with anything, you can just come to my school community. And of course, you can do the course. There's a course within school, and of course, once more, access to all my templates. And if you go back to, so I mentioned this node thing. So what is it? There's actually 4 types of nodes that we have to take into account. There's a trigger node, data transformation, action, and logic, and all of these are nodes. So for example, if you look at a trigger node, what do? They basically start the n8n workflow. So if you come back to this workflow here, I'll just say create new workflow. When you hit first step, you'll see something. All of these are trigger nodes, and there are different types of trigger nodes. So there's, of course, when clicked, there's on a app event, which of course is from another app. There's on schedule, so you can schedule a trigger to start the workflow. Of course, there's also a webhook call that's coming from perhaps a Lovable or Replit, on form submission. So there's all these kind of different triggers that start the workflow. And then if you just click on one, trigger manually, hit execute workflow. Of course, it's not connected to anything, but basically, when you hit execute workflow, then this workflow will run, and all triggers, you can see that there's a lightning icon next to the trigger. The next node is an action node. So they essentially perform tasks within your workflow. So you can have different action nodes that could, perhaps it's a Gmail action node. It's going to send an email. Maybe it's on a Google Drive and a Google Doc where it's actually going to create a file. You can make API requests, set calendar events, etc. And I'll walk through a workflow at the end. Then data transformation. So this is, the process of data flowing through it. So for example, if you have, a workflow and there's perhaps 2 layers of data coming through the single node, you can use an aggregate that's going to essentially combine it into one output. So on the other side, it can feed into a node on the other side. So these are just data transformation nodes. You can set things, and of course you can merge perhaps data coming from 2 sources. Logic nodes, so think conditional decision makers. So these will essentially run in the workflow, and you'd have to distinguish, within the workflow, you'd basically give it instructions, and it would determine, if something is true or false, what path it should be taking. So that's a logical node. And now I just want to build a simple workflow so that you can perhaps see this in action. So if you come back to our workflow, and let's just build a simple calendar agent. So if you come here and just say AI agent, and you can see that it's connected to a chat trigger. So of course, this only works on a chat trigger. There's 3 things to note about an AI agent. It needs some sort of it needs some sort of brain. So i.e. an OpenAI ChatGPT model as its brain. It needs some sort of memory, and it needs access to tools. So if we say the memory is going to be OpenAI, so what you would have to do is set up your connection when you're actually setting this up. So if you look at ChatGPT if you look at OpenAI, this node and how it works, what you'd have to do is come here and say create new credential, and you'd have to go to OpenAI, your OpenAI account, get the API key, and you'd have to paste it here. So how do we do that? You'll see now I'm on the OpenAI platform. So what you'd have to do is, of course, create an account and come into OpenAI .com. So it's the actual platform. It's not ChatGPT. It's kind of like the main website and the back end of things. So you'd have to go to settings and then API key, and then you'd have to create your new secret key. So you'd name it and then say create secret key, and then you would copy that. So of course I've already created mine here. And sorry, one thing I have to note is that you have to load credits, and I just loaded a $5 credit, but that's going to last you a long time because each token is like essentially cents. Each time it runs, it eats up tokens, and the cost is so minimum that $5 maybe go more than 3 months, 4 months, depending on your usage. So you'd have to add your billing details, and then buy minimum, I think it's $5. Of course you can buy as much as you want, and then you'd have to come here and create your API key, and you'd go back to n8n and you would essentially paste it here. So that's essentially what you have to do. Click on save, and of course you can name it. I went ahead and created mine already, and then you can also see from the list which model you're using, and for the purpose of this 4.1 is fine. So something to note is n8n also gives you free OpenAI credits, so you can go ahead and select that, but then you're only going to get access to a limited amount of models. Or you could add your own account and you could get access to the latest models. So that's something to note here. But if I have to go back, and now as mentioned it has a brain, the next thing we need to do is add a simple memory. So you can go ahead and just keep this as default, and then give it access to a tool. So what do we actually want it to do? Let's connect it to a calendar. So for a calendar, we'd have to search Google Calendar, and once more set this up. And how do we set this up? Create credential. We'd have to sign in. So let me go ahead and sign in, give it access to everything, say continue, connection successful. So now it has access to my calendar. Let's set this up, give it access to everything that it needs. Start, basically telling it when to start and when to end. Let's quickly save this. So one thing to note is we could give this agent instructions, and we do that by saying options, system message. And here we basically giving it its role or duty. So you are a helpful assistant that creates calendar events. That's it. So as you can see now, we'd say, please create an event for 23 August 2025 at 6 called dinner. So as you can see now, the event titled dinner has been created, and it has basically run. It's just a simple agent within a workflow. And if we go to calendar, we'll see 23rd of August. This is an empty calendar. I promise that I do more things. And it's basically created this event for 6 p.m. So that's just a simple workflow, and how we can actually give the agent instructions. And now of course we can go ahead and give it access to more tools. We can give it system prompts. We can create sub agents. We can connect this to different workflows. Like there's so many things that we can do within this workflow and within n8n.
RAG systems. So what do they do? Retrieval augmented generation. So it basically combines two approaches to help the AI model provide more accurate answers. So two things. Firstly, retrieval. So it retrieves information from external sources, and I'll get into that just now. And then on the other side, it uses that information to basically generate an output. So basically, the benefits of the system is that there's no guesswork, and the information is always up to date. As an example, if you go into a ChatGPT or an LLM model and you typing in information and you requesting perhaps specific information about a company, that information may be a bit dated, whereas like you as a company can upload latest information to this RAG system. So when a question gets asked or something gets prompted, it's going to give up-to-date information based on that document or / text info that you just fed it. And then just moving on. So just going into a bit of theory before actually getting into building out a RAG system. Something to mention is vector databases. So basically, if I had to quickly describe what this is on the right-hand side, so the RAG system needs a way to store information and retrieve data efficiently. So it does that in a form of this vector database. So, data gets stored in something called a vector. And basically, what is a vector? It's just a numerical database that represents words or text. And it just helps the RAG pull information quickly and efficiently. So as an example here, if the query is kitten, and if this is sort of the database, and these are sort of vectors, if the query is kitten, what's going to come up is everything that's close to that specific query, i.e. cat, dog, maybe it's like animals, and then it's going further and further out to now it's completely different from a kitten, but it's a wolf. Same thing here. If perhaps if we're searching for healthy fruits, so healthy fruits, the first thing that will maybe come up is an apple, and then going slightly further away will be banana. So that's like the back end of what's happening in this database when we actually prompt this RAG system. And just moving to a quick RAG system and what this would look like. If we in n8n now and building out a quick workflow, and we try to retrieve a document that we fed to our Google Drive, so that's what we're doing here, and then it's going into this database that I just showed you. So Pinecone Vector Store is on the back end of this. You basically seen this database here, this vector database. So Pinecone, there's a few others like Superbase and a few other programs and databases out there. But in this example, I'm using Pinecone. And what I'm doing here, what I mean by like embedding data. So once this workflow executes, and once this information, i.e. maybe it's a PDF, maybe it's documents, information that we uploaded to the Google Drive, once it gets stored in terms of a vector database, what's happening is that whatever data is coming into here, right, it basically handles it and passes it into a text splitter. And the reason for doing this is it just basically breaks up the text, so it makes it more efficient to retrieve the data. So that's what's happening in the system here, and I'll go through a build shortly. But basically, the applications of a RAG agent, customer support. So think someone goes onto your website, there's a chatbot. So at the back end of that chatbot is perhaps a RAG system where we've fed it information related to your products or services. So if someone talks to that chatbot, it's going to display and give answers according to what it was fed on the back end. So that's basically, an example. Another example would be, you could build a RAG agent for internal support, internal training, maybe it's upskilling, maybe it's new tech, and you can feed this RAG system so that your, the team can essentially chat with us to retrieve the latest information about that specific thing. It can be also a sales enablement tool. So it can be used for example, like giving customers more information about the products or services. It could be used to perhaps discover warm leads. There's like so many applications to it. So I'm going to go into a quick build to make this quite practical. So I came into n8n and I basically just set up this quick workflow, and I'm going to walk through it step by step. So the first thing I did was just I started it with a click trigger, so execute workflow. And then the second thing I did was, as mentioned, I have to connect it to some sort of storage facility. So where am I actually storing the documents in this example, Google Drive? So what I did here was I added this node, which is a Google Drive download node, and I connected it to my Google Drive account. I'll add a link as to how to actually set up your Google Drive. But for the purpose of this demo, I quickly went ahead and set up my Google Drive. And what am I doing here? I'm retrieving a file, and I'm just saying operation download. And what is the file? So it's just, Manchester United's latest earnings. If anybody wants to know about that, I'm a Man United supporter, so fortunately. So I have quickly just populated a document, and I'll show you what the document looks like here. So I just went into ChatGPT and said, hey, write me up a document of Manchester United's latest earnings, all their financials, and that's what it gave me. So you can see what this document is about. It's a 4-page document, and basically what it's doing in this workflow is I'm trying to download this document and feed it to the database, the vector database, so you can essentially break it up into vectors as we earlier discussed. So that's essentially what I'm doing here. And then I'm actually connecting it to a tool called Superbase. So Superbase Vector Store, basically what I'm doing here is Superbase is a platform which is, this is actually the homepage of Superbase. So think of it as the vector storage vector storage platform that we previously discussed. So, other storage platforms could be Pinecone, and there's other ones out there, but for the purpose of this, let's just use Superbase. So let's quickly go ahead and create a Superbase account. So I already created one, but basically once you're in, you can start a free account. You can go to start project, click on new project. You can just name it, create an organization and name it, name your project, and create a password. And remember what password you are inputting here, because we're going to use it later on. Select your region and then click on create new project. So as you can see, I created my new project, and this is basically the interface of Superbase. So how we would connect it is we'd go to your left hand side here, the panel, and just basically go to project settings and open up this here, go to API keys, and where you see legacy keys, service role secret, you just click on reveal, copy this, go back to n8n and insert it here where it says service secret role. So that's the first thing that you need to do. The second thing you need to do is actually get this host HTTP. So I'll show you where you get that now. Go back. So I'm going to navigate here to data API, and where you see URL, so you hit copy, and this basically is your host, so you'd have to paste it here. So that's how you set up your Superbase account, and you come down. And basically what I'm saying is here is, so, I haven't created a table as yet. Of course, like on mine, it says that I've created a table, but on yours, you're not going to see this as yet. So what you'd have to do is go to docs, you'd scroll down, quick start for setting up your vector store. So basically we'd have to set up a table so that information gets stored in this table. Remember, we're creating a vector database, and remember what that vector database looks like. So it's going to be easy for the RAG agent to now find information from this vector database every time it receives a prompt. So we'd come here and we'd have to copy this SQL code. So hit copy, and we go back to Superbase SQL editor, and you'd have to paste the code here. Once you hit paste, you hit run, and you should see that the code is going to be the same as mine. And now we can go ahead and go to table, and now you'll see that a table has been created. Just ensure that you selected the right table, it's documents, and you can leave embedding size as 200. And of course the query it's match underscore documents, which is just a table name. And if you hit execute workflow, now in my case, I've already ran this workflow. So you'll see it's picking up 7 items, but basically I fed it the document. It's picking up the document from Google Drive, and now you'll see that 7 items will be showing in your table. Go back here, 7 items. Cool, so now this is set up. Of course, mine is already set up, so I have to also mention that you'd have to add an embeddings. So for this one here, I just added an embeddings OpenAI. So if I have to open this up, connect it to your OpenAI account, and I select text embedding 3 small. And then the last thing we need to do is basically we need to chunk this, do something called chunk, because the PDF we're receiving it it needs to be, it's binary for PDF, so we basically need to convert this. So basically what I'm saying is here, type of data is binary, because now you're receiving the PDF data, so we're essentially just converting it, and I'm basically just saying loading all input data, formatting it to automatically detect, and then just text splitting will be simple. That's all you have to do here. And this is essentially the pipeline that we've set up here. And this is the steps. Of course, this entire workflow, I'll add it to the school community, so you'll have access to it. And then we quickly need to set up the actual agent. So how do you set that up quickly? First thing we need to do is a chat. To essentially, it triggers, basically the user can now ask questions to this chat agent. So go ahead and set up a chat agent. So that's what I did here. And I didn't really give it any instructions, but basically, as you know, a chat agent, as we discussed previously, it needs a brain, it needs a memory, and it needs a tool. So basically, the memory I just used is OpenAI, GPT-4 Mini. And then I gave it a tool, which is just a super-based tool, right? Because this agent is gonna get instructions and get a question, and it has to essentially look at what tools it has available to give said answer back. So we're connecting it to Superbase. Of course, we already set up our Superbase account, and I just basically said, hey, retrieve documents as a tool for AI agents, and I just basically gave it a quick description as to what the purpose of this is. And I said, call this tool to find out more information about Manchester United's earnings, because this is what the entire workflow is about. And as mentioned earlier, you could build an agent to a customer service agent, a sales enablement tool, like so many different applications of it. And then your description has to be in accordance with what's the task of it. And then I'm saying, hey, table name will be documents, because we already set that up. And then limit, you can just leave it as 4. One more thing we have to do is just add Postgres chat memory. And I'll show you how to quickly set this up. So once you add this from your tool list here, open this up, connect your account, and there's a few things that we need to do for this one here. But basically what I'm doing is it's connected to a chat trigger node. And if we go to create new credential, so we need to extract some data to get some data from Superbase to actually connect this up. So how you would do that is, once more, go to your Superbase account where it says connect. You'd have to essentially scroll down, and here just say view parameters, and this is basically the information that we need to copy over for transaction pooler. So host, port, user, and I think those are the 3 things that we have to copy over. And we go back, let's just see this. Host, you can leave database as Postgres, user as mentioned, password. Now this is the password that you created a moment ago when I said, hey, don't forget your password. So this is what you have to input here, and you can leave max number of connections as 100, and then a port as mentioned, you get it from here. So that's how I connected the Postgres memory. So basically, what it's doing is, every time that every new question that it gets asked, instead of going to the database, it can just pull from previous chat history and memory, so that it becomes quicker to actually retrieve information. So if I say, give me Manchester United's earnings over the last quarter. Let's see what it pulls. And now it gives me the information for the last quarter, Q3 to 31 March. Go back to our document. There's information. And that is our RAG system. Now, as mentioned, there's so many applications of this. I think the next step would be to essentially, firstly understand, what sort of information you want to feed it, and then of course edit it accordingly to set information. APIs. I'm sure that you've heard about this before, but in this video, I'm just going to quickly run through why it's important, because it really is important, especially when we're building no-code tools. Application programming interface. So essentially, in a nutshell, it allows one app to speak to another app. That's it. Now, there's three different things that we have to know when considering, learning about APIs and how to actually use them. API endpoint, so that's basically the specific address, the URL for our requests, i.e. like where is it going to, like what is that endpoint, and then API call, so that's basically the request that you make to app to basically ask it to do a task, and then HTTP request, so it's basically a method that allows you to send the API over the internet. Like that's just a simple example of how I can best describe the theory of it. So just moving on, HTTP request, just more information about this. So there's two types of requests that we can make. We can either get or post. So very simply, a get request would be to essentially extract information from the app back to n8n as an example. Or post, we're basically sending information from n8n to that app. So that's just the two simple things that we have to know. And when would we use HTTP request? So in n8n, as you know, most apps are integrated. There's over 300 apps that I think are integrated. But with HTTP requests, it's used where there's no actual built-in integration for the app. Then we'd have to establish an HTTP node and use that to essentially program to act as the integration so that the apps can once more speak to each other. And a simple example would be Appify. So Appify doesn't have a plugin or an integrated app on n8n. So we'd have to use an HTTP request to essentially speak to it. And I've shown how to actually set that up in another video, but for the purpose of this video, I just want to quickly run through like why it's important and how to actually differentiate between all three of them. So I just want to quickly give an analogy of like a restaurant, because I heard this and I thought that it was pretty sound and pretty easy to understand. So think about the API as the restaurant that you're walking into, and then think about the endpoint as the kitchen that processes the order, that where the thing gets made, like that is the endpoint. And then think about the call as the order that was processed. And then of course, once more, the HTTP request is just basically, think about it as the waiter that's taking the order and delivering it to the kitchen. So that's how we essentially differentiate between different API calls and the difference between API endpoints calls and of course an HTTP request.